Ever wonder which wartime deaths shocked the world most? Did you know some military casualties changed history forever? Number 10. Erwin Rommel, the Desert Fox's forced suicide. When Hitler's government came knocking at Field Marshal Erwin Rommel's door on October 14, 1944, he knew exactly what was coming. The Desert Fox, as he was known throughout World War II, faced an impossible choice: commit suicide and receive a state funeral with his family's safety guaranteed, or face a public trial for his alleged involvement in the July 20th plot to assassinate Hitler, almost certainly followed by execution. With Nazi officers waiting outside his home, Rommel kissed his wife and son goodbye, got into a car with the officers, and swallowed a cyanide capsule just minutes later. Rommel had earned Hitler's respect through his bold tactical genius during the North African campaign, where he commanded the Afrika Korps with such skill that even his enemies admired him. Unlike many Nazi commanders, Rommel was known for treating prisoners of war humanely and ignoring orders to commit war crimes. His reputation for military brilliance and relative decency made him a rare figure respected on both sides of the conflict. The official story presented to the German public was that Rommel had died of complications from injuries sustained earlier in the war when his staff car was strafed by Allied aircraft. In reality, Hitler had ordered his death after suspecting him of involvement in the failed assassination attempt, though historians debate how deeply Rommel was actually involved in the plot. The Nazi regime gave him an elaborate state funeral, complete with Hitler sending a wreath. Meanwhile, the Reich propaganda machine worked overtime to hide the truth. When news of Rommel's death hit international headlines, few outside Germany's high command knew the real circumstances. Only after the war did the full story emerge. His forced suicide represents one of history's most famous examples of how totalitarian regimes eat their own heroes when loyalty comes into question. Number 9. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, the architect of Pearl Harbor. Did America assassinate Japan's greatest naval commander? On April 18, 1943, American P-38 Lightning fighters intercepted Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto's transport plane over Bougainville Island in the South Pacific. Within minutes, the mastermind behind the Pearl Harbor attack lay dead in the jungle, his plane shot down in what remains one of history's most significant targeted killings during warfare. Yamamoto wasn't just any military leader, he was the brilliant strategic mind who had transformed Japan's Imperial Navy into a world-class fighting force. Despite initially opposing war with the United States, famously warning Japanese leaders he could run wild for 6 months to a year, but after that, I have utterly no confidence. Once the decision was made, he planned the Pearl Harbor attack with meticulous precision. The surprise assault shocked America and pulled the sleeping giant into World War II. What made Yamamoto's death so extraordinary was that American intelligence had intercepted and decoded Japanese naval messages revealing his exact flight plans. President Roosevelt himself approved the mission, code-named Operation Vengeance, despite ethical concerns about targeting a specific individual. When news broke that Yamamoto had been killed, it sent shockwaves through Japan while Americans celebrated the death of the man they viewed as responsible for Pearl Harbor. For the Japanese, Yamamoto's death was a devastating blow to morale and military leadership. His body was recovered from the crash site, cremated, and given a state funeral in Tokyo where he was posthumously promoted to Fleet Admiral. The American military kept the details of the operation secret until after the war, fearing that revealing their code-breaking abilities would compromise their intelligence advantage. Number 8. Lawrence of Arabia, the mysterious motorcycle accident. Was it really just a tragic accident that killed T.E. Lawrence? On May 13, 1935, the man known worldwide as Lawrence of Arabia swerved his motorcycle to avoid 2 boys on bicycles near his cottage in Dorset, England, suffered catastrophic head injuries, and died 6 days later without regaining consciousness. Though technically occurring during peacetime, Lawrence's death came between the world wars while he was still serving in the British military under an assumed name. T.E. Lawrence had become an international celebrity following his exploits during World War I, where he helped lead Arab forces in a rebellion against the Ottoman Empire. His wartime adventures were immortalized in his memoir, Seven Pillars of Wisdom, and later in David Lean's epic film, Lawrence of Arabia. After the war, Lawrence struggled with his fame, joining the Royal Air Force under the pseudonym T.E. Shaw in an attempt to escape public attention. His sudden death at 46 sparked immediate conspiracy theories. Some suggested it was suicide, while others proposed more sinister possibilities: assassination by British intelligence services concerned about his political views, or even foreign agents settling old scores. The fact that Lawrence had been preparing to retire from the RAF and had recently met with Henry Williamson, a known fascist sympathizer, fueled speculation about political motives. The motorcycle accident occurred at a time when Lawrence was still internationally famous, and news of his death made front pages around the world. His funeral drew political and military leaders, along with literary figures like Winston Churchill and M. Forster. Whether his death was truly accidental or something more mysterious, it prematurely ended the life of one of the 20th century's most enigmatic wartime figures. Number 7. Manfred von Richthofen, the Red Baron's final flight. Who shot down the greatest flying ace of World War I. On April 21, 1918, Manfred von Richthofen, the legendary Red Baron, pursued a novice Canadian pilot too far into Allied territory. Flying his distinctive red Fokker Doctor I triplane low over the Somme River in France, Richthofen was struck by a single bullet that passed through his chest. He managed to land his aircraft in a field before dying in the cockpit, ending the career of history's most famous fighter pilot. The Red Baron had become the stuff of legend even before his death. With 80 confirmed aerial victories, Richthofen was not just Germany's highest-scoring ace. He was a national hero whose exploits provided rare good news on the German home front during the grinding later years of World War I. His nickname came from his practice of painting his aircraft bright red, a flamboyant choice that defied conventional military wisdom about camouflage. When news of Richthofen's death reached both sides of the conflict, it created an immediate sensation. The Allied forces recovered his body and buried him with full military honors, a rare gesture of respect toward an enemy. The British Royal Air Force officially credited Canadian pilot Captain Arthur Roy Brown with shooting down the Red Baron, creating an enduring piece of aviation lore. However, controversy over who actually fired the fatal shot persists to this day. Modern analysis of Richthofen's wounds suggests the bullet came from the ground, likely fired by Australian machine gunners. This lingering mystery has only enhanced the Red Baron's legendary status in military history. His death marked the end of an era in aerial combat, where individual pilots could still become chivalric heroes despite the increasingly industrialized nature of modern warfare. Number 6. Glenn Miller, the big band leader lost at sea. How does a famous musician simply vanish during wartime? On December 15, 1944, Major Glenn Miller boarded a small UC-64 Norseman aircraft at RAF Twinwood Farm in England, bound for Paris, where he planned to arrange a Christmas concert for troops. The plane took off in poor visibility and vanished over the English Channel. Neither the aircraft nor Miller's body was ever recovered, creating one of World War II's most enduring mysteries. Miller wasn't just any soldier, he was America's most popular bandleader who had voluntarily joined the Army Air Force at the height of his career to entertain troops. His Glenn Miller Orchestra had dominated the swing era with hits like In the Mood, Moonlight Serenade, and Chattanooga Choo Choo. When he disappeared at age 40, he was at the peak of his fame and influence on American music. The news of Miller's disappearance was initially kept from the public. The military waited until December 24, 1944, to announce he was missing, creating a somber Christmas surprise for fans worldwide. His death was not officially declared until 1945, leaving a massive void in American music and culture. Numerous theories have emerged about Miller's fate. Official reports suggest his plane was likely brought down by adverse weather conditions. More dramatic theories propose that his aircraft was accidentally hit by Allied bombers jettisoning their explosives over the channel after an aborted mission, or even that he actually reached Paris but died of lung cancer in a hospital or at a brothel. The lack of wreckage or remains has allowed these theories to persist for decades. Number 5. John F. Kennedy Jr., the heir to Camelot. Can tragedy strike the same family twice? On July 16, 1999, John F. Kennedy Jr., son of the assassinated president, piloted his Piper Saratoga aircraft toward Martha's Vineyard with his wife Carolyn and sister-in-law Lauren Bessette aboard. The plane crashed into the Atlantic Ocean, killing all 3 passengers and creating a national outpouring of grief that echoed his father's assassination 36 years earlier. While JFK Jr. died during peacetime, his death resonated because of his family's military and political legacy. His father had commanded PT 109 during World War II before becoming president and commander-in-chief during the Cold War. John Jr. himself had become an American icon the moment he saluted his father's casket as a 3-year-old boy in 1963. The investigation revealed that Kennedy, who had obtained his pilot's license just 15 months earlier, suffered from spatial disorientation while flying over water at night with hazy conditions. Without advanced instrument training, he lost track of the horizon and sent the plane into a fatal spiral. The search operation involved the Coast Guard, Navy, and Air Force, highlighting his status as American political royalty. When news broke that Kennedy's plane was missing, it dominated global headlines for days. The recovery of the bodies and subsequent burial at sea aboard a Navy destroyer echoed military funeral traditions. President Clinton authorized this naval involvement despite Kennedy's civilian status, acknowledging the family's special place in American history and consciousness. Number 4. Amelia Earhart, the aviator who vanished. What really happened to America's most famous female pilot? On July 2, 1937, Amelia Earhart and navigator Fred Noonan disappeared somewhere over the Pacific Ocean during their attempt to circumnavigate the globe. Their Lockheed Electra aircraft vanished without a trace, creating one of history's most enduring mysteries and cutting short the life of a pioneering aviator who had broken numerous flight records. While not officially a military figure, Earhart's disappearance occurred during the tense pre-World War II period when Japan was expanding its Pacific influence. She had served as a nurse's aide during World War I and maintained connections with the military aviation community throughout her career. During her final flight, she was in communication with the USS Itasca, a Coast Guard cutter assisting with her navigation. The news of Earhart's disappearance created immediate international headlines. President Roosevelt authorized the largest air and sea search in naval history up to that time, deploying aircraft carriers, battleships, and numerous aircraft to scour the Pacific for any sign of the missing aviator. The search cost over $4 million, equivalent to over $70 million today, and continued for weeks before being called off. Theories about Earhart's fate have proliferated for decades. The official conclusion holds that she ran out of fuel searching for Howland Island and crashed into the ocean. Alternative theories suggest she may have landed on an uninhabited island and died as a castaway, or even that she was captured by Japanese forces suspicious of her photography equipment and possible espionage. The lack of definitive answers has made her disappearance an enduring wartime-adjacent mystery. Number 3. Che Guevara, revolutionary's execution in Bolivia. How does a revolutionary become an icon? On October 9, 1967, Ernesto Che Guevara was executed by Bolivian forces in a schoolhouse in La Higuera, Bolivia, creating one of the most powerful martyrdom narratives of the Cold War era. The Argentine revolutionary who had helped Fidel Castro seize power in Cuba was captured the previous day after a firefight with Bolivian special forces trained and supported by CIA advisors. Che had resigned his positions in the Cuban government to export revolution elsewhere, first unsuccessfully in Africa and then fatally in Bolivia. His death came during the height of Cold War proxy conflicts, with the United States actively working to prevent the spread of communism in Latin America. The details of his final moments became immediately controversial. Although officially executed under orders from Bolivia's president, questions remain about the exact American involvement in the decision. When his death was announced, Bolivian authorities publicly displayed his corpse to prove he was truly dead, reminiscent of medieval practices with slain enemies. The famous photograph of his body, eyes open and expression seemingly serene, inadvertently created an image of Christ-like martyrdom that would fuel his posthumous legend. Before burial, his hands were cut off for fingerprint verification, adding macabre details that only enhanced his mythological status. News of Guevara's death traveled globally, generating dramatically different reactions. In the United States, it was celebrated as the elimination of a dangerous revolutionary. In Cuba and much of Latin America, he became an immediate martyr. The famous photograph of Che taken by Alberto Corda transformed into perhaps history's most reproduced image, appearing on everything from T-shirts to protest banners, ensuring his wartime death would create an afterlife far more influential than his actual military campaigns. Number 2. Adolf Hitler, the Führer's bunker suicide. What happens when history's greatest villain takes his own life? On April 30th, 1945, Adolf Hitler committed suicide in his underground bunker in Berlin as Soviet forces closed in on the Nazi capital. Along with his new bride Eva Braun, Hitler bit into a cyanide capsule before shooting himself with his Walther PPK pistol. Their bodies were taken outside, doused with gasoline, and burned in a shell crater in the Reich Chancellery Garden. Hitler's death came after 12 years as Germany's dictator and nearly 6 years of the devastating world war he had unleashed. In his final days, surrounded by only his most fanatical followers, he married Eva Braun in a brief civil ceremony, dictated his political testament blaming Jews for the war, and appointed Admiral Karl Donitz as his successor. Meanwhile, Berlin crumbled under Soviet bombardment and the Third Reich collapsed around him. When news of Hitler's death reached the outside world, initial skepticism was widespread. Soviet leader Joseph Stalin publicly claimed Hitler had escaped to Spain or Argentina, while privately ordering an intensive search for his remains. The Soviets recovered partial remains believed to be Hitler's, including a jawbone and dental work that matched his records. These remains were secretly buried and exhumed multiple times during the Cold War as the Soviets tried to prevent any burial site from becoming a neo-Nazi shrine. The announcement of Hitler's death triggered the final German surrender within days, officially ending World War II in Europe. The manner of his suicide, hidden underground rather than facing justice, deprived the world of a public reckoning with his crimes. His death in the final days of the conflict he started bookended the most destructive war in human history. Number 1. Osama bin Laden, the midnight raid in Abbottabad. How did America's most hunted man meet his end? On May 2, 2011, U.S. Navy SEALs stormed a compound in Abbottabad, Pakistan, where Osama bin Laden, the mastermind behind the 9/11 attacks, had been hiding in plain sight. In a 40-minute operation code-named Neptune Spear, the Special Forces team confronted and killed the al-Qaeda leader, ending a decade-long manhunt that had come to define America's war on terror. Bin Laden's death came nearly 10 years after the September 11th attacks that killed nearly 3,000 people. He had evaded capture through a combination of mountain hideouts, loyal supporters, and eventually settling in a walled compound just miles from Pakistan's premier military academy. The raid itself was extraordinary, conducted without Pakistan's knowledge, using stealth helicopters, and culminating in a direct confrontation that left bin Laden shot in the head and chest. When President Barack Obama announced justice has been done in a late-night television address, spontaneous celebrations erupted outside the White House, at Ground Zero in New York, and across America. The operation's details became instant headlines worldwide. Bin Laden's body was quickly buried at sea within 24 hours according to Islamic traditions, but with procedures designed to prevent his burial site from becoming a shrine. The death of America's most wanted terrorist promptly generated controversy. The lack of photographic evidence, the administration refused to release images of bin Laden's corpse, fueled conspiracy theories. Questions about Pakistan's knowledge of his whereabouts created diplomatic tensions, while debates about the legality of killing rather than capturing him raised ethical concerns about targeted assassinations. Despite these controversies, bin Laden's death marked a symbolic conclusion to a chapter in modern warfare, though the conflicts he helped ignite continue to this day. Do famous wartime deaths reveal more about how we mythologize conflict than about the individuals themselves? What lasting legacy do these high-profile casualties leave on our collective memory of war?